Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Iberian. This is Crusader Kings III's 26th dev diary. Today we're going to talk about the map scope. That is a dev diary and a dev diary topic that we already knew about from last week, because it was mentioned that this would be the next one, and I was very excited for this entire dev diary. I mean, I think everybody was very excited. I cannot get enough of the map, especially after the paper map screenshot of the last dev diary, but I will tell you right now that most of the screenshots, of course, you know, you can see where the straight upgrades were made to everything, you know, how the map looks, how the map feels, and how the map works, but I will also tell that I do think there are some shortcomings here. It's a bit of a mixed bag, this one, more so than I think any of the other recent dev diaries were a mixed bag for me. So let's just jump straight in. First of all, I do want to thank Emil. Thank you for writing the dev diary. Thank you for taking the time of letting us know what is going on. And what we're going to do is, by the way, we're going to jump back and forth between the CK2, you know, actual map that I have running right here in the game, and then CK3's map screenshots. We're going to take a look at that. We're going to evaluate what it looks like and what it feels like. You know, we're going to be looking at here for actually playing the game. So first of all, Europe was reworked from the ground up. Now, in particular, this apparently pertains to, you know, Eastern Europe. In particular, fleshed out with a lot more detail than what you may be used to in CK2. What we can see here is Kiev. We can see the rivers as well. And then over here we have Chernihiv, of course. That is a site that we all know, I think. This is, by the way, 1066, so I am using 1066 as well. We are in, you know, 15 September 1066, before William the Conqueror actually took over in good old England. And what we're looking at here is essentially, you know, Pripyat, Desna, and Dnieper all, you know, kind of combining into the Dnieper. Now, the way this looks, honestly, is perfectly fine. I don't really have any complaints, opinions on this. This is very nicely done. In the, you know, closest zoom level, of course, CK3 does the thing where, essentially very similar to, I think, Imperator and Hearts of Iron 4, it puts you into a position where you can still read what is going on the map, because, you know, you have now these outlines, but at the same time, it does actually also show you the geographic features, and I think that is actually really nice. I personally, and I think this is no secret, when it comes to Imperator Rome, I really love the way that they unified the political and the geographic map, because it made me feel more, you know, into the game. It immersed myself more to know, hey, my soldiers are walking through these foresty areas, whereas in CK2, of course, you don't really see that at all. All of Russia, or rather all of Eastern Europe, looks very, very just like this big landmass, and that is just, you know, how CK2 works. There's not really anything negative or positive about that, but that is no longer the case in CK3. I really like that. I think that is a really good part of the map. Honestly, if you play on the topographical map mode here, then, or the terrain map mode, then respect to you, because I couldn't do it. But in CK3, that will without a doubt be possible in the closest zoom level. Now, when it comes to the province count, I don't think there's actually too much of a difference between what we can see right here. We will see it in later screenshots, where there are sometimes more provinces, sometimes fewer provinces in certain regions of the world and of that general area. But at the end of the day, I don't think this one is all that different. There are some differences, of course. Chernobyl, for example, doesn't exist over here. It's just Korostin, so this, for example, is split. On the other hand, you know, this is quite normal. Kiev, Pereyaslav, and Chernihiv, of course, as well. As Slutsk no longer being here. Slutsk is now split between Bruisk and Slutsk, at least I think this is Slutsk. So there are some expansions, but it's nothing world changing. Let's move on to the next screenshot. This screenshot shows us Holmgardra, or rather Novgorod at this moment, I guess. But, you know, Holmgardra, of course, was when the Rurikids weren't already Russian Orthodox. And what we can see right here is actually, you know, a very similar map as well. What I do really want to point out, beyond, of course, you know, you can see the geographical features and still tell what is going on. What I actually really like is the usage of forests as, you know, wasteland, sort of. You know, you're obviously not going to settle there. Those are very hard to cultivate and aren't really part of the span of the game when it comes to properly cultivating these areas. And I like the idea of cutting these off via the wasteland mechanic, which this clearly is, because if it was just an empty barony, just for the record, it would just be empty. What you can see here, for example, with Valdai, I assume there are 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 empty baronies, because every single of these buildings that you can see here, and let me just zoom in, of these buildings is a barony. So, for example, the Sebesh is exactly this right here. So these 3 baronies, maybe there's a 4th one that I can't make out because there's no building yet. If there is no building, then we would know this is an empty barony. It wouldn't be like this. So this is actually wasteland. Again, personally, I'm a huge fan. Beyond that, I don't think there's too many differences here, especially even when it comes to the actual nation makeup. You know, you can see it right here. The adjacent nations, I think we have a difference here in Ingria and what is held over there. You know, first of all, the provinces, of course, the count is a bit different, but also it's just all held by Novgorod in the start. And I think they just made some corrections here. I already know that the Eastern European borders, also in 1066, but in particular in 867, which of course we're not seeing here, but all of those were quite vague, and like bringing them into CK2 was a bit of a weird experience, I guess, because you don't really have that many sources for it. It's very difficult to actually do something with that. But as you can see here, so Ingria has now become, you know, here's the separation at the river. Ingria has now become part of the Novgorod realm, and then over here we have Belozero become a part of Novgorod as well, whereas it was a part back in the day here of Pereyaslav. But I think those are just minor changes, not too big a difference. I really like the way it looks. This is nice geography. I think this is a very, very well done regional map. And now let's move on, because there are of course special buildings. Now, if you weren't aware of this, and they did bring this up, but I do want to mention it just in case you forgot. If you're not aware of this, there are no great works like they are in CK2, you know, when they were introduced. I think with Holy Fury, I can't remember. Was it Holy Fury or was it 936, the Iron Sentry update? Either way, you know, the way that they exist here now in CK2 and the way that you can build it, you know, in any province where, you know, if in case you have the money, in case you have the stats, in case you are the right culture and religion, etc., etc., those things will no longer be in CK3, but there will still be special buildings. And you can see it right here. You have the option to start the construction of Notre Dame. The first construction stage here, level 1, takes 5 years. It gives you some bonuses. You know, holding taxes, for example, development growth, popular opinion, of course. It makes you more attractive to the people in the world, or rather in this county, because you brought some glory to God, and with that some glory to them, of course. Also known as Our Lady of Paris, this magnificent cathedral is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, constructed in the Gothic style and impresses with numerous statues and enormous colorful rose windows. On the outside, the cathedral is covered with sculptures vividly retelling biblical stories, allowing even illiterate peasants to understand the glory of God. So I assume that the AI, you know, has a certain date, for example, until when they actually start the construction of Notre Dame. I think it was started in 1165, I want to say. So I assume that the, you know, AI has a bit of a start and stop goal there. You know, they won't really construct it any further, or maybe they won't even start until that year, but the player, of course, has a bit more freedom. So this is quite nice, and you can see it on the map as well. But this map in general is also interesting. First of all, here is Notre Dame, of course, you can make it out right there. But second of all, what is quite interesting to me is that there is more depth to the map of France. I mean, just in general, I think you can see it quite nicely. If I zoom in like this, I think this should do it. So here we have Ile-de-France, which you can see, and this is something that will later on, in a later screenshot, in a later area, become a bit problematic in my point of view, but let's talk about that when we get to it. You can see Ile-de-France is a bit larger than Paris was in CK2. That is, of course, because you can now see the baronies on the map. But beyond that, I think we have a bit more density. You know, I think especially in Normandy, this becomes quickly apparent when you look at Normandy right here. The borders, just in general, I think, make for far better borders. I mean, it's all a bit more granular. It's all a bit more, you know, kind of bunched together, instead of being these, you know, semi-like either very weirdly shaped provinces, or they're just very round. And that is, of course, you know, again, not really a rib on CK2. That's just a limitation of the game and the map and the way it worked. But when I look at these province borders, you know, when I look at the amount of provinces, I really like it. I also, of course, like the geographic view, although it is quite a bit more boring, I think, than Eastern Europe. But that aside, let's move on to Iberia. And it's not actually Iberia, but this is just southern France, the border with Burgundy, and of course, the border with the Holy Roman Empire in 1066. And I think you can see here as well, there are many, many more provinces. The density is quite a bit higher, which is quite nice. You can see it here with Forest, and then you have Viviers, and you have Lyon, and then here you have so many on this. I think this one is just a split province, essentially. Vienne has been split into Viennois and Valentinois, and then down here you also have a couple more provinces. The Duchy of Toulouse is now either split into multiple duchies or considerably larger. I think you can see Gévaudan as well split, and then even Toulouse is split into maybe like 2-3 provinces even. I mean, Toulouse in CK2 is a gigantic province, but I really endorse this. I think this is nice because this encourages a bit more, you know, you can blob, and this is something that I always endorsed about HIP, for example. If you don't know HIP, it adds an incredibly detailed map to CK2 as a game, but the way it works is essentially it feels more satisfying to blob and blob and blob for 50 years in HIP and still only be in control of, let's say, Aquitaine, whereas if I blob in, you know, for 50 years in CK2 Vanilla, I might end up ruling over all of Europe, because the province density is simply very different. So I highly endorse this province density. I think also this river being sailable is quite nice. That is very, very nice. I didn't mention this before, but of course you can also tell that these rivers can be sailed by Viking ships and anybody that has the right technology and understanding of boats. But with that being said, of course, you know, it is Aquitaine and Burgundy, and it is quite more detailed. I think that is always nice to see when a map, you know, goes on to a new level of detail, and that is something that we can definitely make out right here. Now let's move on, because there's a lot more screenshots to come. What we have here is northern Iberia and then southern Iberia. Let me just open both of these. So Northern Iberia right here, we've already seen this, but I think we saw it with the colored in map version. If you zoom out a bit, then you will see it colored in. This is fairly close to what we have right here, but it also isn't. And what I mean by that is that a huge benefit of that new CK3 map, no matter what else, you know, is up with that map, but a huge benefit is that the borders can look much more kind of zany is the wrong word. They can look much more interesting. So if I look at this, for example, this strikes me as a real border, you know. You have also the geographic features, of course, so it's quite clear as to why people are drawing these borders here, why it's a good, you know, location to defend, for example, but it doesn't really look intrusive. Najera doesn't look like Castile, yeah, has been treated poorly by Navarra, but then you look at this and it's just like, my god. First of all, of course, the province density in Navarra is literally twice than what it used to be in CK2, but beyond that, I mean, Najera just doesn't really fit in. It looks a bit awkward when you look at this. That's just, you know, again, a map restriction right here, but I think the way they are doing it in CK3, and you can see, by the way, that, what's your name? Galicia. Galicia is going a bit further south, isn't it? To Lisbona and Egitanea. Am I seeing that right? I think I am. What is this? Ebra? Coimbra? Could that be? Yeah, this is Coimbra, and then I think it goes a little bit further down. But beyond that, I think it's quite nice. You can see really the strength of the map, not to mention, of course, that everything that is related to the highlands of Iberia is much more detailed than what it was in CK2, where, you know, you have the string, and that really is it. And what you could also see here, by the way, I mean, since you never see the geographical mode, you just don't even see that this is a very, very hilly, very mountainous area, even in the real world, of course, and in CK3 that will be possible. Now let's move on to Southern Iberia, because I think here it also becomes much more obvious just what the huge benefit of the CK3 map as a conceptual thing is. Look at the border. I want you to look at the borders of the Dunanite dynasty, okay? It looks very, very odd, doesn't it? This is just like this round blob. Then you have the mountains, meaning you have to cross through terrain of other people before you can even go to your coastal areas. And that's really all you have there. Now, this is no longer the case. Look at the Dunanite dynasty. This is the Dunanite dynasty. They look so much better. Their borders are better. And we saw this as well, actually, in the last Dev Diary, where the Dunanite dynasty all of a sudden had very, very much acceptable borders. But that aside, you can see this river, these rivers here are sailable. I assume there also are specific river crossings where you have to cross, and that is really all that you can do there. That is something that they, of course, already have confirmed for England, so most certainly also confirmed for other regions of the world. But I gotta be real with you, just the way this looks in general when it comes to how the borders are drawn, whether it looks awkward, whether it looks like a video game, which, you know, CK2 undoubtedly does, I think this is a huge benefit. Now, I will mention that if you look here, for example, Cadiz and Algeciras, which is probably not how I pronounce it, but don't worry about it, you can see that it seems, and I mean it kind of is, like there is a province gone, but I think that is just mostly reshifting, I would call it, of the provinces, because Sevilla is now across the river and not just here on this side like it is on CK2, because of course going across a major river is impossible in CK2, like, you know, just, no, actually it's not impossible, what am I saying? Why would I be saying this? It is definitely possible, but they chose not to do it in CK2, mostly because, of course, you want the river crossing when it comes to the military strategic thinking behind it. Now, as you can see here, Granada has been moved to where it actually is. Malaga here now taking control of the south, but I think all of that is perfectly fine. They didn't appear to add, at least as far as I can tell, as many provinces. They definitely added some here, but they did not add as many provinces to CK3 Iberia as they did to the Burgundy, France, and Normandy region in the earlier screenshots, but I don't think that is necessarily bad. I really want to stress, and here, by the way, you definitely can see these are a couple more provinces than what we have over here, I think. I will say, I don't think more provinces equals good. I don't think more provinces equals better. I just think more provinces when you have the tools is a very good idea. I'm not saying it needs to be everywhere, and what we're seeing here is definitely fine. Like, if you conquer this realm, this is a large realm. Just look at the amount of counties that you have if you rule over southern Iberia alone, of course, which kind of translates to, I guess, Badajoz and Andalusia and Valencia in CK2, but that is a huge area, all things considered, so I do think this is definitely just an acceptable province size, no issue whatsoever. There's also the Alhambra fortress. Of course, it already existed to some sort of capacity in CK2 at the starting date. I think it was first built in like 889 based on a Roman fortress, something like that. And let's take a look at this. Yeah, there you go. The Alhambra is a fortress built upon the remains of an ancient Roman fortification. While it is serviceable as a defensive structure, with the right investments, it could be turned into something something much more. Yeah, the Alhambra was essentially just built, you know, as, again, a fortification, as a way to make sure that the region stays in the hands of the current ruler, but then it was built up to the royal palace of Alhambra. That is very cool to see these special buildings advance like that. I think the entire Great Works thing being more integrated into just buildings is excellent. I'm personally a big fan, because in CK2 we had it then at the end of the day kind of split, right? We had locations such as, for example, Stonehenge, locations such as, for example, the Hagia Sophia, but at the same time we also had these here, which were just special buildings, but they weren't great works. But the Theodosian walls, you could argue, are without a doubt, you know, special buildings, or rather great works. I think Jerusalem also has one. Let me just check here. Nope, they do not. Is it you? Nobody has anything. Okay, well, good to know. I thought Jerusalem had something special, but don't worry about it. The way this essentially works is, I'm a big fan. Of course, it will be visible on the map. I don't think we can actually spot it here. Let me just see. And you can, by the way, just to point this out, you can determine what exactly they are. These are Muslim, I believe, clan lords. This Cordoba, if I'm not mistaken, should be... yeah, they are a republic, right? So I think that determines what their sigil is. But this looks like a... I don't know. Maybe this is like, again, a republic, or maybe this is like something else. I don't know what they did with Cordoba. Honestly, I wouldn't even know what the historical situation of Cordoba was. But what I can tell you is that all of these are Christian symbols. These are Christian banners. You know, if you have a normal... what's it called? A normal shape that, which name I have forgotten, then that is Christian, and this is over here is the clan government. This is Muslim right there. Now, that being said, let's move on and away from Iberia. Let's move on to what I just pointed out, the Theodosian walls. Those also exist as special buildings. Very, very cool. They are duchy buildings, meaning it is highly restricted of how many you can build them, but I am sure that they strengthen Thrace quite considerably. The fort level goes up +5 for this holding, of course. Garrison size goes up, and garrison goes up as well. And then this county hostile raid time +50%. That is excellent, of course, making sure that Constantinople can't just be raided by anyone. Then the levy size goes up, the holding taxes go up, and development is usually impacted as well, because if you cannot be raided, then of course your county will recover better from anything that, you know, could shrink its development. Beyond that, all your holdings in the duchy, levy size goes up, and holding taxes go up. Very, very cool. The Theodosian walls were built during the reign of Emperor Theodosius II in the early 5th century, but they still remain some of the most formidable fortifications built by human hands. And then down here we have the Hagia Sophia Cathedral, of course also in the game in CK2, but in that case, of course, as a great work. This county development growth goes up, and then your realm, you get a learning bonus, you get intrigue per level of fame +2, my god, piety per night +0.01, no, 0.1, that's it. And then monthly renown +5%. That is a dynastic thing. That is how you can build up your... you can make decisions as the dynastic head, as the dynast, with renown, and I don't actually think renown gets invested into your dynasty lineage at all. I think that's splendor. But that aside, number of knights goes up, and knight effectiveness also go up. The Hagia Sophia is a true marvel of engineering, with a massive dome standing out as the most impressive feature. Completed in AD 537 by Emperor Justinian I, it now houses the ecumenical patriarch and stands as a monument to Christianity. And so it will remain for all eternity, for surely nothing could ever topple the might of Rome. Of course not. Now let's check this map out before we come to the point where I will say... what I'm not too happy about. I think this map, again, a very good example. Let me just check. I think I spot the Hagia Sophia there. I think this is the Hagia Sophia. It looks very similar, if I'm going to be honest with you, with this one. So I think that is the Hagia Sophia. But I think this map that you can see right now here in CK2 and that you see here in comparison to CK3, it speaks for itself. I mean, this is a huge difference. Really showcases the plateau, of course. In Existence Rebirth, a good free advertisement for you, I guess. But you can also see how there are simply more counties. You can see Constantinople is its own thing, if I see this correctly, which I believe it does. Does that actually say Byzantium? Wait a minute. It might. I think the city was called Byzantium. Okay, well, I guess it's a county of Byzantium, and then the city of Constantinople in that county. That makes, I suppose, some sense. And then we have some separation over here. I think you can see how these borders have changed and how significantly they have changed. And then, I mean, down here, this is just a huge difference. This tiny county as well. There's just so much going on here in comparison to what we had here. They also changed the borders of Prusa and Nicaea. You can see that Prusa no longer has this kind of bodged-in coastline. It's now no longer coastal county. But I think this is perfectly fine. These maps, I have nothing really negative to say about it. This looks perfectly reasonable to me. You can also see the neat little crown here, you know, marking it, of course, as a... almost said Catholic, my god, no. As an Orthodox empire, but more importantly, let's talk about this. First of all, I'm very happy to see this, Bavarian. There is, of course, a very strong... you know, lingual connection between all of these regions, as it is today, as it was back in the day. This is very cool to see that Germany in particular is split. You can see Swabian, you can see Bavarian, whereas here you can only see German. But I am a bit confused in a variety of ways, I would call it. So what we can see essentially is, right, you know, core Bavaria, then of course, I mean, you know, depends on how you define core Bavaria, I guess, but then we have modern day Austria, we have Slovenia, and then over here we have Italy, of course, and I'm just so confused because it took CK2 such a long time, and I'm not unhappy, and I mean, you know, neither should be the Slovenians, let's be really, or the Slovenes, but Bavarian, I think this down here should be Carantanian. I don't think that it is adequate, be it language or be it cultural rights, to call Bavarians, you know, this group including Carantanians. That's not really, I don't think that holds up. What also confuses me, but in a less negative way, because it's just terminology, but, you know, again, like, this means Carantanians literally are not in the game, which is very confusing to me. But what confuses me is the word Cisalpine, because, like, Cisalpine, I've never heard that applied to a cultural region. Of course, in the north, you know, they have very distinct languages, and I really want to point that out. Germany, and I actually think the terminology between German and English differs here, but what we have in German is a dialect. I think that's just called an accent in English, or maybe that's also called a dialect. It really doesn't matter, but the difference between Bavarian and German, for example, is less than the difference, unless you like push it as far as you can, than the difference between Italian and the Italian local languages. So for example, Venetian, Milanese, and so on and so forth. These people can barely communicate with one another, and the Italian language hasn't been standardized until 1800 and something, after the reunification, or rather the unification of Italy. So I'm just confused that this is one total cultural room. And the thing about this is, what confuses me so much is that we have such an in-detail, such a modular, such a granular religion interface and work, just the way it functions. And I expected the same for culture. I expected, and this is the thing that people will point out very quickly if they are Bavarians, for example. They will point out Bavarians actually consist out of Swabians, they exist out of Bavarians, no, Bavarian Bavarians, they exist out of Franconians, and they exist also since the 60s out of Sudeten Germans. And the thing about it is that you can always go one layer down, and I understand that this is difficult if you're developing a game, if you want to make a game playable, if you want to implement game mechanics, you have to put a line down somewhere. You have to say, we're not gonna cut Bavarian down any deeper, you know? I understand that fully, but at the same time, I will tell you, for example, with the Italians, I feel like it may have been more adequate to cut more down on that, to make more granular cultures, but organize them in groups. For example, let's say you have the proper local groups, which is Venetian, which is, you know, let's say Milanese. Is this where Milan is? I think it is. And then they're all in one regional group, which would be North Italian, for example. That's just a terminology that I came up with. Or maybe Cisalpine, I'm not really against that. And then all of those belong to the greater Italian Peninsula group, which is, you know, Lombards, etc., etc., Sicilians, and maybe even Sardinians, although Sardinians, of course, are very, very unique. But all I'm saying is, why I have a problem with this screenshot is, first of all, Carantanians are completely absent, which just confuses me, and I'm not an expert on Carantanian and, in extension, Slovene culture, but I do think there should be a difference. If you're gonna have these together, then I don't think Carantanians fit in that group. Of course, they were underneath the Bavarian crown, starting with the Carolingian Empire, but, you know, it was a very shifting, it was a very drifting relationship, and I don't think that that makes them Bavarians as per se, and I don't think that they ever viewed themselves as, you know, the same as, for example, the people in Munich. I understand, again, gameplay mechanics, but I would have really wished for a more granular approach, judging by the fact that religion takes such a granular approach. And then the second thing, of course, is Cisalpine. Again, I do think a more granular approach would have been something that I would have understood a bit more. It's already nice to see the distinctions here. You know, in CK2, this is, of course, just called Italian. I assume that this is split, and by assuming, of course, I mean I know this is split because I can see it right here. But at the same time, I feel like, I don't know. I understand the issue on a game development level. You have to, you know, put a period somewhere. You have to cut it off and say, this is where we distinguish. We distinguish only down to Bavarian. We don't distinguish, you know, for example, to like Swabians and whatnot. Although the Swabians already do exist, but there's more mixing going on here, of course. Culture is a very, very iffy, very vague topic. I understand that because it is a very vague thing, you know. You can't really grasp the notion of culture and clearly define it, or otherwise scientists surely would have done it already. But I do think this just leaves me with a bit of a mixed feeling. I hoped we would be going with a very modular, granular approach, a fusion approach, similar to, you know, how religions work in CK3. Down here, we have a correction to the map, you know, that we experience in CK2. This is 1066, and you can see, if I'm not mistaken, this is before the invasion of Armenia, meaning that Seljuk Alp-Arslan? Somebody told me how to pronounce it, but I have to Google that. Before he invaded Armenia and Asia Minor, but as you can see, they corrected it a bit. They corrected it, first of all, of course, over here. You know, they now hold this region a bit more. The wastelands have been fully put under control of the Seljuks, whereas here that hasn't been the case, and they've moved in a bit further towards Jerusalem, which, you know, here in the game in CK2 is under Fatimid control. Beyond that, of course, they also moved a bit further to the northeast. I assume, I'm not a regional expert at all, but I assume that this is just, you know, how the map really looked back in the day, and they corrected it from CK2. You can see that they took control of the entire Karakum desert coming from the north, and I assume that the Mangishlak, for example, are also an Ogres tribe, although again, or rather an Ogres tribe / nomads, although I'm not too sure about it. There isn't much change in this map, like in this particular region, other than that, and this is of course already a huge change, but it's not different change. Alania was split. This is all Alania in CK2, but beyond that, I mean, this is pretty the same thing. I assume it was already correct in that case, but essentially map corrections, always very nice to see. Very happy to see them take that step. Beyond that, here we have a development map, and you can see that Baghdad is excellently equipped with development. Of course, that's what Baghdad is. It was the center of the Caliph, and look at that county hall, the Caliph Al-Qaim ibn Al-Qadir, oh, the man that I'm playing right now in CK2. Very nice to see, but what is more important to me is, I really like, and this is a huge benefit already to how it looks, that, you know, development is essentially strung along the natural situation. So this is, of course, we have Mesopotamia, then we have the trade routes over here towards Aleppo, towards Antiochia, and then it goes towards the East Roman Empire. All of this would benefit more from that than the more isolated, more mountainous regions of Persia up here, or rather of Iran up here. And I think this is really nice. This development map really shows some regional development changes, which I think are much more accurate than, I mean, whatever this is. It's just like, it's all rich. It's all very rich. I think that is really nice. What they're doing there with the map here in CK3 in the Middle East looks very promising. I like the idea, and I hope that this can be used as a fundamental stone for some more trade and economic mechanics that, you know, aren't just make money off of a trade post, but instead build up a region via, for example, trade routes. That would be very cool. Of course, not a direct impact. There are no trade route mechanics as far as we know. I don't want to give you any hope there, but I will tell you this looks very much more natural than what we have over there in CK2. Now, let's take a look at this. The House of Wisdom, we already know, of course, from CK2. It already stands in CK2 in Baghdad, right over here. There it is, the House of Wisdom indeed, but now it is just a special building, so it's not actually, you know, like a great work again. You get learning, you get monthly lifestyle experience, you get different cultural opinion, cultural fascination progress goes up, which I assume means that people will convert to your or other cultures, etc, and maybe you can also convert to other cultures quicker. Faith creation and reformation cost goes down. Very nice, very valuable to hold that, I think. It also does make sense, because if you, for example, want to, you know, reform Sunni Islam, you want to come in from a different angle. If you hold Baghdad, you hold the center of what used to be, or rather what used to be the center of the Muslim world for centuries, meaning it makes a lot of sense that this would make it easier to convert, or rather reform a religion. The House of Wisdom contains a vast collection of books, and the scribes therein work tirelessly both day and night to translate even more great works of literature. The sources vary from Greek, Persian, Indian, and many more. Truly, it contains the entire world's knowledge. A shining beacon of human knowledge, and comfortably far from the illiterate horsemen of the steppes. Very nice. Now over here, that's an absolute beauty. I mean, just look at this. Mesopotamia looking really good. Baghdad looking really good. I mean, you know, honestly, in this screenshot, of course, you can't really see anything, but also, I mean, it looks nice. Honestly, it looks nice for CK2 terms, but it's not comparable to CK3. Just look at this. This, you want to live here. These are the floodlands in which you want to live, in which you want to build your civilization from. Very nice. I really like it. I also like the province density. Just look at the difference here. It makes, of course, sense to have more density in regions that are, you know, more lived in than other regions are. You don't really need, you know, more province density in regions such as, I mean, they have more province density really everywhere, but in regions that already had a lot of provinces, for example, over here, we didn't really need that many more. I think this is perfectly fine. Baghdad was, honestly, a very sparsely countied kind of situation over here. But that aside, let's move on from this absolute eye beauty. This is eye candy right there. And you can also see Merv and Dihistan right here. I mean, it's just not comparable. Let me just see if I can find the exact right angle. I think this should work, right? Yeah, Merv is a bit further there, but there you go. Yeah, you see Dihistan, you see all of these different provinces. This is very nice. It's a good map. Listen, what do you want me to say? CK3 is a really good map. It is very well done. Respect to the artists and everybody working on the project, of course, no doubt. Now here comes, next to the cultures, my other big worry. Why I am not necessarily too happy about this dev, or I am still happy, but it is a mixed bag. And the mixed bag comes from the following. I will not follow the route of argument that says, but the name of the game is Crusader Kings. You need to care mostly about the Crusades. I think this is untrue. To me personally, Crusader Kings II and Crusader Kings III are more Sims Middle Ages, Sims medieval times than Crusader Kings. The scope has changed such a long time ago. When Crusader Kings II released in 2012, of course it was Crusader Kings focus. Of course that is exactly what happened, and everybody said, why can't I play Muslims? Now they implemented so much more, the scope is so much larger. I don't want to have the game name argument, so don't even worry about it in the comments. It's a bad argument. But what is a good argument to me is that this is a hot area. We have the Muslims, we have Jewish people, of course, and we have the Christians. All fight for the Holy Land, and it worries me, it confuses me in many ways that the Kingdom of Jerusalem's territory appears to not have gotten more granular. And what I mean is, when you look at Gaza right here, Jaffa, and then Acre, right? These are 3 counties. Now, let's just... What am I doing there? Get out of here. Let's just look at that region in CK2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's look at what lies behind the coastal counties. The County of Jerusalem is much bigger, of course, you know, because the baronies need to be showed. You can see right here 1, 2, 3, and then an empty barony right here, so 4. And then 2 Tiberias. So that's 2 provinces right behind the coastline, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What happened there? I don't understand. I don't understand what happened there. It's like really my point. I understand, of course, the region, you know, was very prosperous, but it also had very much just desolate areas in certain areas, you know. I get it. It's not necessarily comparable to a very urbanized area, like, for example, the Byzantine Empire. But I don't understand why we shrink down from 5 to 2. I do think the borders, of course, the provinces, the actual province borders look much more beautiful than they did in CK2. And I think, honestly, the Kingdom of Jerusalem is a very odd-looking one in CK2. It's a very fat one, despite, of course, historically being mostly on the coast. But it just confuses me. Also, Damascus, I mean, look at this, right? This is a county. It's so much... There's so many more provinces here. I just don't understand why. And I'm not necessarily saying it's good or bad. I just feel like it doesn't feel right. When I look at it, I thought there would be many more provinces here. There would be much more granularity where I can make different borders, different warlords, different dukes that take control of the region after they say the King of Jerusalem isn't defending us well enough. That sort of stuff. But instead there's a cut down on provinces. It's a bit confusing to me. I will say that. I will have to see it in action to really, you know what to think of it, but so far I'm not quite... I mean, I guess the balance idea would be, right, that this is essentially all that the Crusaders will establish themselves in, which is a much more reasonable border than getting all of this fat piece of pie right here. So essentially, instead of this fat thing, they just get these regions, but you could have still made this more counties, right? Like, if it's just this, that's fine in my eyes, because then you have a strong Muslim stronghold over here in the east, which of course historically was the case. But it's just like, it's cut down. That's 6 provinces here. That's tiny. It's 5 provinces, I can't count. it's 5 provinces, but I hope that you know what I mean. I would like to see more of that region and what is conceptualized for this. Beyond that, of course, beautiful map. The water is just gorgeous. Honestly, the map is just... I mean, the map art. How long can a man talk about it, eh? Now, let's move on to the new regions. Very exciting. We have the region of Ghana, or rather, West Africa over here. They expanded, I mean, to a huge degree. Look at this. They were completely cut off from any water in CK2. They were completely cut off from any way of going north beyond these small paths here, and these small paths are also not really realistic, because obviously, I mean, you know, how realistic can you make it? It's of course more a nomad situation, I think, where you just like kind of pilgrimage through it, and then you come back to civilization, or you come back to civilization down there, instead of, you know, these thick paths. But they expanded on it. I think I'm a huge fan. If you're gonna have this region in the game, do it properly, and they are doing it properly. You can see this huge sailable river, but they already declare that this huge sailable river indeed won't be sailable by Vikings, because you can't go around the African western coast here. And then, of course, I mean, honestly, it makes sense. The Vikings never raided down there. Like, of course, yeah, you could do it, you could allow it, etc., but I'm actually not that big a fan of it. You can see these small paths here. They look much more thin, much more realistic. Now, I really endorse that. I really like that. I can't say much about the faiths, because I just don't know anything about it, but it's definitely better to have all of these than African pagan. I think this is very exciting to look at as well. A big fan. I really want to play in those regions when the game comes out as well, mostly because it's just so much truly new stuff. You also, of course, have Benin City. You know, now I gotta ask, actually. I don't think that's in CK2, right? I play way too little down here, because it's just one religion, and, you know, of course, these cultures, but it doesn't really go into depth compared to like the playthroughs that you can have up here or over here even. But beyond that, I'm very, very happy. I think this is a really nice addition. You also can go ahead and, man, this is a long dev diary, isn't it? And you can construct the Walls of Benin. The Walls of Benin are a massive series of earthworks, Ia and the Edo language, that encircle the entirety of Benin. The walls are built of a ditch and dike structure with an inner moat and an inner exterior rampart. Gives you defensive bonuses, of course. I think this is very cool. This is a very nice addition, and I just noticed, my god, I've been talking for 34 minutes straight. Alright, let's hurry it along a bit. So you have these sailable rivers, but now they are saying you can't sail it as the Vikings, because this is Mare Incognitum. Of course, with a bit of a wink-wink situation, you can still get down there if you just make it happen. Just figure out a way to go down south. Yeah, I know I will definitely do it. I will be raiding down there as a Viking at some point just to see it go. We also have a huge expansion to the Horn of Africa over here, to Mogadishu now being added. I mean, it was just... I don't think I need to say too much about it. This was a very awkward looking area, and it's very nice that we now have all of this addition. Hopefully making playing on Socotra a bit more viable, a bit more interesting, but this is very, very nice. This is a very neat addition, and we already knew about it, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. You can see it more in detail. It's such a pretty map, but you can look at the pretty map yourself, I think. Look at Egypt. Look at beautiful, beautiful Egypt. Gorgeous. Is that the Fatimids? It must be, right? I don't actually know what the historical symbol would be there, but looking at it, this looks like, yeah, they're ruling out of Cairo, so this looks very much fitting. Can you spot the pyramids? I don't know if I can. I can see mosques, etc. I think I see some Monophysite stuff. I assume, wait a minute, which religion is this stuff? Yeah, there's the Miaphysite here, so I assume that these are regional churches that I can see right here. I don't think this is a mosque, right? This is a church. Beyond that though, very interesting the approach taken that, you know, instead of just having this entire area here, which is practically empty because everything of course is kind of focused around the River Nile, they have it very restricted instead, and if you control this region, then you control the entirety of Egypt, including of course the primarily desert oriented zones. And we also have Damietta. I mean, this is the floodlands that they were talking about, and then you have some deserts. Did I miss, you know what, this is actually a good point, did I miss some oases somewhere? Is that even... I don't know, I can't spot any, so I'm sure I didn't miss them. And then the pyramids, there they are, even though I cannot see them on the map, I swear to god. I'm looking. I must be blind, you tell me in the comments, yeah? The pyramids, most prominently the one of Cheops, stand as wonders of the ancient world. Vast and impressive, they enhance the image of any ruler who controls them. Now, let's move on to the Far East, because I have already wasted enough of of everybody's time by talking like a madman. This is Tibet. And the map of Tibet has been expanded quite significantly. What is most commonly known as Tibet today is this area, because that's the administrative region within China, but Tibet as a cultural area actually goes like this. Like, maybe I was a bit too far there. It's something like this, where most of Kham is cut out of CK2, so I think this is a nice addition. You can also see there's a much more much more alive kind of spirit about Tibet in CK3, mostly because there are many more princes than there are in CK2. You can see the difference just so significantly, I think. You also can see Sagia, so Sakya, which is one of the achievement lords that you have to do in CK2. It just, honestly, the borders just look so much better. Just look at this stuff. Just look at the way they form themselves and kind of touch on each other. It's amazing. These are very, very well done. Very, very good looking, primarily. And then, of course, you have Khotan, etc., etc. So that is not really an addition here. That is, of course, already here with Kocho and Sechu. But beyond that, I mean, Tibet is just looking beautiful in general. Now, let's move on. They also gave Tibet more faiths, which I know nothing about. So Bönpo is definitely Bön, which you already know, but I assume its normal name, its real name is Kyawe Bönpo. And then we have Nangchos, and Nangchos is the Tibetan Buddhist denomination, if I'm not mistaken. And the two most prominent faiths being Bön and Nangchos, a Buddhist faith syncretized with the different Tibetan beliefs and practices. Yeah, there you go. So a culturally inspired local religion based on Buddhism. And then we have some Tengri, of course, and I don't know. Honestly, I'm not very well versed on any of the religions in this region, so I'm very excited to explore it in CK3. I hope so are you. Vaishnavite, Shaivite, Kiraist. I think those are just different central gods, but all Hinduism. I might be, honestly, I'm probably wrong. Let's just not spout any nonsense here, shall we? Let's move to Mongolia, because you can see they added Lake Baikal, so they actually added Mongolia proper. definitely being a positive sign there, I think, for most people that would like to play in the location that is called China. But as you can see, this was, of course, not even close to being in the game in CK2. We're talking like literally over here, so the map was expanded very, very far. It was even expanded into Burma, which is confirmed later. You can see the Great Liao, and this is the split, I believe, in... no, this is the split, I think, in 867. So this is the Khaganate down here, and then we have the individual lords up here at Lake Baikal, and then we have Great Liao down here. Looks very good. I think the mountains here look considerably better than what we have right here instead at this very moment. Can't really say too much about the region though, because just I don't really know it. But the presence, I think, of the lakes is just very flavoring. It's very, very nice. And then down here, we have Myanmar, or also called, of course, Burma. Starting shortly after his conquest of the Mon Kingdom in the south, most of the area will be under his control, giving you a great opportunity to push into India. Alternatively, you can start as Pagan in 867, yet a small and upstarting kingdom, allowing you to play with the unique faith of Ari Buddhism. I don't know anything about it, I want to learn more about it, but they have the Shwedagon Pagoda, which is a special building that gives you bonus to mostly piety, but also tyranny gain minus 10%. The Shwedagon Pagoda is a sacred Buddhist stupa built by the Mon people around the year 500. It houses many famous relics such as the staff of Kakuzanda, the water filter of Konogamana, a piece of the robe of Kazapa, and 8 strands of hair from the head of Gautama. I'm very excited to see this region actually in action. I think India as a whole needed a revamp to make it more interesting, just as not, you know, like, oh, your history is boring, more, definitely more like meant in CK2. You could have had a bit more in here, I think, make it more interesting to play in this region, and I think they have, with the variety of religion, making it quite a bit of a difference. But here are my too long didn't watch summaries of this video. The map is gorgeous. The additional provinces everywhere are nice, or rather in most places are very nice. The map is gorgeous to look at and will definitely help me with immersion. But I'm very much not sure about culture, and I am also very much not sure about the entire topic of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. But we will see all of that in action at some point. Not that I'm announcing anything, because I have nothing to announce on that topic. What is your opinion on it? What do you think about it? How do you feel about the entire thing? Emil, thank you for writing the dev diary. We would love to see more screenshots. If you, Emil, are listening to this, or if anybody else is listening to this that is interested, I would be very, very happy about some grandiose religion and culture screenshots. Just, you know, show me the entirety of the map so that we can just sit over that and talk about it. I would be very interested. Either way, I want to thank the members of the channel that are making videos such as this one possible, namely the Barons Aaron, Stefan, The Richest T, Snywolf, Emma Mello, Thomas, Lachlan, Mitchell, MFV, and Florian. Then, of course, also the Counts, Shifty, Wombat, and Kazen, and last but not least, the absolutely gorgeous Dukes. So special Stark, Nathan, Knight of Squires, Kenneth, Lexo, Eric, and Aiden. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow. Next week, I mean, later. Alligator.